Good evening and welcome to our Good Friday service at Hilltop Christian Church. Glad you're here. It's a busy week, but we are blessed to be able to celebrate this time of year. Tonight we put our focus on the crucifixion of Jesus and the significance of the cross of Christ. Jesus was arrested and his closest followers were scattered. He was paraded in front of leaders who cared more about their own positions than seeing justice done. Jesus was horribly beaten and tortured. When he was presented to the very people who he came to save, they shouted, "Crucify him." He was hung on a cross in the company of criminals, though he himself was innocent. He was stripped and mocked. Crying one last time, Jesus proclaimed, "It is finished," and then gave up his spirit. All hope seemed lost. His closest followers saw the Messiah die and get buried in a tomb. What were they to do now? They couldn't make sense of it. Yet we know today that the reason Jesus died was so that we who put our trust in him may live. Would you please join me in our hymn, "When I Survey the Wondrous Cross," page 195, all voices.
Reading from the book of Isaiah, chapter 53. Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot and like a root out of the dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and familiar with suffering, like one from whom men hide their faces. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows, yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all like sheep have gone astray, each of us has turned to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers silence, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. And who can speak of his descendants, for he was cut off from the land of the living, for the transgression of my people he was stricken. He was assigned a grave with the wicked, and was rich in his death, though he had done no violence. Suffer, and though the Lord makes his life a guilt offering, he will see his offspring and prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. After the suffering of his soul, he will see the light of life and be satisfied by his knowledge. My righteous servants will justify men, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death, and was numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors.
As we partake in communion tonight, let us remember that we come to the table not because we are perfect, but because God invites us to the sacrifice of his Son. It's by his grace that we are called, and by his grace that we are saved. As we remember the sacrifice of Jesus, let us consider how we can give of ourselves as he gave for us. And as we participate in intinction tonight, if you would come down the middle aisle and then exit to the side aisles.
On that final night after supper with the 12 disciples, Lord Jesus took the bread, he broke it, said, "This is my body broken for you. Take, eat, all of you." In like manner,
after dinner, he took the wine, he blessed it, and poured it out for his disciples. And gave it to his disciples, saying, "Drink and eat this bread and drink this wine in remembrance of me."
As we take communion, we're going to be singing a song. It's called Love Song. It was written by a band called Third Day, and it was meant to be a song of Jesus singing to you. So if you want to follow the words, they're in the bulletin insert. I would sit as a man to climb the mountain, just to be with the one he loves. How many times has he broken that promise? It has never been done. I've never climbed the highest mountain, but I walked the hill of Calvary, just to be with you. I would do anything. There's no price I would not pay. No, just to be with you. I would give everything. I would give my life away. I would said that a man swim the ocean, just to be with the one he loves. All of those dreams are empty illusion. It can never be done. I've never swam the deepest ocean, but I walk along the raging sea, just to be with you. I would do anything. There's no price I would not pay. Oh, just to be with you, I would give everything. I would give my life away. And I know that you don't understand the fullness of my love, how I died upon the cross for your sins. I know in your eyes how much that I fear, and I promise I will do it all again. Just to be with you, I've done everything. There's no price I did not pay. No, just to be with you, I gave everything. Yes, I gave my life away. I gave my life away. Just to be with you. Just to be with you. Just to be with you. Just to be with you.
A reading from the book of Hebrews, chapter 2, verses 10 to 18. Listen, listen. In bringing many sons to glory, it was fitting that God, for whom and through whom everything exists, should make the author of their salvation perfect through suffering. Both the one who makes men holy and those who are made holy are of the same family. So Jesus is not ashamed to call them brothers. He says, I will declare your name to my brothers in the presence of the congregation. I will sing your praises. And again, I will put my trust in him. And again, he says, here am I and the children God has given me. Since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might destroy him who holds the power of death, that is the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. For surely it is not angels he helps, but Abraham's descendants. For this reason he has been made like his brothers in every way, in order that he might become merciful and faithful high priest in service to God, and that he might make atonement for the sins of the people. Because he himself suffered when he was tempted, he was able to help those who are being tempted.
Just wanted to share a few reflections on Good Friday. When we think about that day when Jesus was crucified, I think one character sticks out most that most of us can identify with, and that's Simon of Cyrene. And he was the one that was forced to carry Jesus' cross. And the Bible doesn't say much about him, most likely because he was just an ordinary person. We do know that he was a devout follower of Judaism because he was fulfilling his obligation of a pilgrimage to Jerusalem for the Passover. He was probably not expecting what was about to happen. He probably wasn't expecting anything at all out of the ordinary. But God chose to pull him in to the pages of history. Simon was meant to have an encounter with God like no other. We don't know if Simon ever put his trust in Jesus or what happened to him after this. But we can guess that it was an encounter that he would never forget. I say that most of us can identify with him because that's how life goes for most of us. We're just going about our business and we are just doing what we normally do, and God intervenes into our lives. He interrupts our lives. And God is, we can experience him in worship and in prayer time, but many times the most powerful experiences are when we're not really expecting them. What I did was be a minister. I shared that with this church before, but at a time where I was a musician and trying to live the rock style life, God came into my world and he pulled me out. And that is for most of us when we experience God. He's always at work around us. And all we need to do is just be sensitive to what the Spirit is saying, to experience those times. And if we don't, we can miss out on so much. I'm going to be doing a short skit for you. And it was written by a couple of guys called the Skit Guys. Very good ministry that they run. And it is a monologue from what they thought it might have been like to be Simon. So this is Simon of Cyrene. Hello, my name is Simon. I'm from the town of Cyrene. And I wanted to share with you something today that it was something that happened to me during the Passover in Jerusalem. Changed my life forever. It was, of course, a long journey from Cyrene, and I traveled a very long distance, and when I got to the top of the Mount of Olives and looked out around over the city, let's just say it's a sight I never get tired of seeing. But normally during Passover, it's a very festive time. You can hear sounds of people celebrating and singing. But this year is very different. Instead of celebration, there were angry mobs in the street, and they were starting to pour out one of the gates. So as I got closer, I could see within the crowd, there were some Roman centurions trying to make way for this man that they were leading. He was carrying a heavy crossbeam, very badly bloodied. I could tell he was being led away to be crucified. I'd seen it before. So I got closer and I nudged one of the people in the crowds and I said, "Who is that that's making such a stir?" He just looked at me and said, "It's Jesus of Nazareth, just another failed Messiah." I was taken aback by this because we had heard of Jesus in Cyrene. We had heard of all the teachings and the miracles, and even some people had said he was the Messiah. But how had it come to this? I couldn't figure it out. And as I was trying to make sense of everything, a Roman centurion grabbed me and yanked me out of the crowd and said, "You, carry his cross." Well, by law, the Romans are allowed to do this. They can make us carry anything for a mile, but the thing about this was, if I got his blood on Passover, which was where I traveled to Jerusalem in the first place, I froze. I didn't know what to do. But then my eyes went to Jesus. His eyes of his, it just pierced right into my soul. And I knew this was not a common criminal or blasphemer. There was so much more to this man. So I complied and I bent down and picked up his crossbeam, put it on my shoulders, and I bent down and helped Jesus to his feet. He was so weak. I could see his back was just raked. It was terrible. And as we walked together, I began to hear first at him and then at me. I could feel the warmth of the blood on my shoulders and feel the spit from the crowd. You know, what was worse is they had taken a crown of thorns, they had smashed it on his head, so the blood was running down his face. But I didn't hear any sympathy from the crowd. All I heard was more yelling. "Save yourself, Son of God! Where is your heavenly Father now?" It was terrible. Drove the spikes into his wrists and his feet. And then, of course, they lifted him up. I know I should have turned away. The crucifix is a gruesome sight. But something just held me there. And I couldn't. I sat there and I watched him. For 6 hours, I watched him suffer. And I watched him keep pushing himself up to get every breath. He breathed his last. And then it was gone. I looked down at my hands now, stained with his blood. You know, at first I thought it was his blood that would make me unclean, but now I realize it's his blood that makes me truly clean. So that's what happened. The day that I helped Jesus carry his. No, that's the day I helped Jesus carry my cross. Jesus hung and died on my cross.
Tonight is a very solemn service, but it is not the end. Though it's important to remember the suffering of Jesus, it's also important to remember that it was not in vain. We leave here with heavy hearts, but we look forward to the hope of Sunday morning. Such is our lives as Christians. Things will not always be perfect, and trials will come. But where God is concerned, there is always hope. Though we may not always understand We serve a God who loves us more than we can imagine. Who among us, if we were there that day, would have looked upon Jesus and seen the love of the Father? Yet we know now that there has never been a greater sign of God's love. So go now in the love of Christ and the blessing of the Father. Amen.
Amen.